Hello, and I think this video will be a sort of cutout video of a defensive social hierarchies and, kind of my magnum, video on why I'm against kind of the liberal egalitarian thought and reasoning, especially in a kind of colonial, non-colonial sense we got in the last video where I kind of picked at Frantz Fanon. And so I kind of want to actually talk a little bit about trees and kind of the rhizomatic and arborescent model that Deleuze and Guattari talk about. And because I think obviously to them trees are kind of this, I'm like just staring at one right now out of my window. Trees are kind of like, obviously you have this visual representation, and that's what the contingency is. Underneath you have, the tree, as they kind of acknowledge, is somewhat rhizomatic itself, and that there's, this underpinning underneath. But, as their critique points out, when you cut at the tree, it obviously does a big blow to it. You're cutting at this meta, this depth. And the rhizome, how it doesn't have this kind of upward mobility to it. It's more adaptable because it's horizontal. You can cut it and it continues on. It grows on in this like hierarchy way. But ultimately he himself is kind of proving the point that by sort of focusing in on the visual and seeing the root as kind of the beginning of the tree, they kind of miss the point of the tree starts off as a seed, and that seed is kind of ultimately just an expression, just like hierarchies. You can continue to battle them on and kind of bring out this egalitarian philosophy all around us. But along that way, we're going to be creating hierarchies and scapegoats along the way that are going to splinter off, just like tree branches. I think the problem is that the tree actually is closest to the kind of Deleuze worldview than they recognize, in that the tree is actually adaptable and a complement to that environment going on. As kind of Bergson points out, the tree isn't really, it's always seen as this kind of individual, but that's not really the case necessarily. It's more of an expression of all of these factors around us. It's a society. That's what he ultimately was getting at. And the tree, it does grow vertically, but it also it grows in many different directions, and as the tree ages, it has different branches, and then you have acorns and seeds that break off and ultimately continue that structure. And just like with hierarchy, we want a sense of direction. We want to go in this sort of direction, but it takes many different forms and shapes along the way. And I think by trying to undermine trees is just kind of this, it's really just this pessimistic point of forgetting that the tree itself and the size of it and its stages aren't necessarily the point. It's the continuation of that cycle. It's the it's like with hierarchies, within friend groups, you can have a group of incels, but they're going to rally around that kind of one guy who they rely on to be sort of their guy, if you will. Even though to other social groups it's like, well, that's just a group of losers over there. But they usually navigate towards one guy when there's some kind of problem going on in their friend circle. And the size of the hierarchy doesn't really matter. It's the direction of it. We want to have this kind of othering. We want to be able to compare ourselves and be able to express gratitude towards the journey of that kind of mobility in and of itself. And yeah, I think that would be just kind of a bit of a start, really. And if the seed is expressive, then I think with the West in particular, that kind of ascension, the sense of overcoming the mountain, if you will. The West, mountain climbing is a Western phenomenon. To get to the top of the summit, to look down from that view. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's out of a sort of malevolence. The tree is humble. The tree doesn't, it does a vertical motion because that's just one of its features of a kind of exemplified way, just like with the rhizome. That's ultimately a radical feature of the kind of tree. And this isn't obviously Deleuze and Guattari. This isn't to necessarily say that this isn't some gotcha, because obviously they acknowledge that it's not really about which model is better. But I think that they kind of I don't think that they took in enough features of the tree. In fact, I think they kind of prove the point of what I'm trying to get at with hierarchy, in that we want the direction of it. And so the fact that he even acknowledges it as expressive, it's an expression of the seed, just like hierarchy is an expression of self-improvement. And for the right, self-improvement, that's a rightist thing to think. To want to self-improve is to gain superiority over your former self, but also in relation to that, people that were in the same ilk as your own, if you move on from them or if you move down. Like we said, the tree moves in all different directions. You have to appreciate the highs and the lows of it as well. Hierarchy isn't just about just getting power for the sake of getting power. It's about the journey of it, the summit, to be able to actually climb and breathe in that struggling air into your lungs that makes suffering worthwhile, quite literally. And just like we've been doing on my channel lately, kind of undermining the racial dialect going on in America right now, and pointing out the flaws of the discussion. And I think one of those is obviously the scapegoat of kind of the colonial thought and colonial reasoning as why people could be coming up short in their endeavors, if you will. And this is ultimately going to create a much less weaker, or a much weaker, it's purposefully created in this mindset is self-perpetuating, in that if they're always usually for these kind of egalitarian thoughts and ideals, but obviously you can see right through that and wonder if it's actually in resentment. And that's not really, that's for a different video perhaps, but I think that gets I think it still points out that by just simply referring to, well, this is just some world that isn't my own, these concepts aren't mine, and there's an oppressor holding me back. Ultimately, life is all about your oppression and overcoming it. And so I don't think it's I think it's pretty lame to conclude that when there's always this consideration of this bloodshed and historical wrongdoings that the West brought onto us as these sort of victimary people. I don't think that I don't really think that actually is the way to go about, in appreciation of our ancestors in this never-ending fight for liberation against these people that admittedly, conquered the world. And I think to just kind of like scoff and walk away. First of all, you can't. I mean, the assemblage of bloodshed, not to get all into some like Evola thought about, the metaphysics of war, but, to me, the assemblage of bloodshed is, perhaps the most concrete, like, culture creator of all. And we are the successes of these never-ending blood feuds, basically, between these tribes over this long history of Western colonialization, if you will. And to kind of just refrain and go into this egalitarian thought, which ultimately is to commodify, as I've pointed out in other videos like Quantities of Color, it's to commodify our experiences and our differences down to this kind of social struggle against this scapegoat of the West. And I don't think that actually brings out these attributes at all. I think it actually realizing that this historical process, an empire didn't just come out of nothing and hasn't sustained itself because just by chance or something like that. It wasn't just chance that the West was able to take the globe, if you will. We're all in this together, as I've kind of jokingly put, which it's kind of sad because such a phrase should be such an affirmation, but it's turned into such a dystopian kind of Orwellian phrase now in our kind of circle, which is sad because it is a pretty innocuous statement that I used to use a lot in my sort of political thought before the coup. But that's gonna do it for this video. Thanks for watching, guys. I am actually thinking about trying to not just be this weird obscure poster with no kind of like social media really interaction at all. I actually do want to interact with my audience more. I see some people are at least clicking on my videos on BitChute, so I mean something. I guess. So yeah, I might make something like a Telegram or something. I don't want to get on like Twitter or something. I think that shit's junk, honestly, and it kind of might get away from my creative experiences that I'm trying to do on here. But yeah, if there's interest for that, I'll definitely consider doing it. Thanks for watching, guys.